He was just trying to pick up his daughter from Sunday school until he saw a wheelchair abandoned outside the church door. No one around, no owner in sight. Something felt wrong. When he stepped inside, he saw her, the woman he never thought he'd face again, sitting alone in the front pew, shaking as if she'd been waiting for him. He didn't know it yet, but that wheelchair, that woman, and that moment were about to turn his entire life upside down. Rain drifted across the small town in thin, silvery sheets, soft enough to blur the streetlights, but heavy enough to soak through the thin jacket Daniel wore as he stepped out of his old sedan. It was Sunday evening, the hour he always set aside to bring leftover food from the diner to the church's community kitchen, a routine he kept partly out of habit, partly out of gratitude, and partly because serving others helped him forget how empty his own home felt at night. His 6-year-old daughter, Lily, hopped out behind him, clutching a plastic bag filled with bread rolls the manager had let them take. "Daddy, hurry," she whispered, her voice carrying the urgency children feel when the world seems too quiet. Daniel offered a small smile, though his eyes looked tired. "I'm coming, kiddo." He locked the car and led her toward the stone steps of St. Andrew's, the oldest church in town, the one place Lily still felt safe after everything they'd been through. The warm yellow light spilling through the cracked stained glass windows made the building look softer than it felt inside his chest. Halfway up the steps, he froze. A wheelchair sat at the top landing, empty, unmoving. Rainwater glistened on its metal frame. One wheel turned a fraction, nudged by the wind, as if someone had left it only moments ago. Lily pressed against his side. "Daddy, where's the person?" Daniel didn't answer. His heart ticked into a faster rhythm, the kind that comes when instinct whispers that something isn't right. People didn't abandon wheelchairs, not in the rain, not at night, not without a reason. He scanned the churchyard, the walkway, the shadows beneath the tall oak tree. Nothing moved except the rain. He stepped closer, touching the wheelchair lightly. It was warm, recently used. A folded wool blanket rested on the seat, damp along the edges. Whoever owned it hadn't gone far. "Stay close to me," he murmured. Lily nodded, gripping his coat sleeve. Daniel pushed open the heavy wooden door. The hinges groaned, echoing through the dim sanctuary. Inside, the air smelled of candle smoke and old wood polish. A single lamp glowed near the front pews, casting a soft halo of light over a small gathering he hadn't expected to find. Voices, low, focused, strained, carried through the quiet hall. A support group, physical rehab session, something the church sometimes hosted for people rebuilding their lives after injuries or surgeries. He'd forgotten it met on Sunday nights. As Daniel's eyes adjusted, he saw her. A woman in her early 30s stood between the pews, gripping the back of a bench with both hands. Her legs trembled under her weight. Sweat clung to her forehead despite the cold air. A man in scrubs stood nearby, letting her fight for every inch of balance on her own. Daniel's breath caught. The wheelchair outside was hers, and she was trying, truly trying, to walk without it. Lily whispered, "Daddy, is she okay?" Daniel didn't know, but he knew this. Whatever had left that wheelchair abandoned on the church steps, it wasn't carelessness. It was courage. The sanctuary was quieter than Daniel expected, the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty, but alive, filled with effort, breath, and the faint sounds of determination. Soft grunts echoed between the pews as the young woman pushed against her own trembling muscles. A portable speaker on the floor played gentle instrumental music, barely audible beneath the hum of the lone heating vent. The overhead lights were off, except for a single lamp near the front, painting the room in warm gold and long shadows. "Evening, Daniel," Father Mitchell called from near the altar. He wore his usual soft smile, but tonight it carried an edge of concern. "Didn't expect you. The kitchen's open if you're dropping food." Daniel nodded, lifting the bag slightly. "Yeah, just the usual. Didn't know there was a session tonight." "There is," the priest lowered his voice. "A small group, people rehabbing from injuries. We keep it quiet, helps them feel safe." Daniel glanced again at the woman standing between the pews. Her legs were locked in place, knees quivering as if each second upright cost her something precious. She wore loose black sweatpants and a faded green hoodie, sleeves pushed to the elbows. Her dark hair was tied into a low, messy bun, strands sticking to her cheeks with sweat. Despite the effort, she held herself with sharp, stubborn focus. The man in scrubs coached gently. "Shift your weight a little more to the right. Good. Hold. Hold. Breathe." She exhaled shakily. "I'm trying," she whispered, voice tight with frustration. Lily stood half hidden behind Daniel's leg, wide-eyed. "She's standing without her chair," she murmured, almost in awe. "Is she learning again?" Daniel brushed a hand over his daughter's hair. "Maybe," he said softly. The priest motioned for them to step closer if they wished, so Daniel approached slowly, not wanting to interrupt. The woman noticed him anyway. Her gaze flicked toward the door, toward where her empty wheelchair sat in the rain, and she narrowed her eyes slightly. Not in fear, not in embarrassment, but in a way that warned she wasn't interested in pity. "I didn't forget it," she said before Daniel could speak. Her voice was breathless but firm. "I left it outside on purpose." Daniel blinked. "I wasn't judging, just wasn't expecting to see that." She looked away, jaw tight. "Most people aren't." Father Mitchell stepped in gently. "This is Emily," he said, introducing her in a tone that asked for kindness. Emily shot the priest a wry look. "That's a nice way of saying I'm being stubborn." The therapist chuckled. "Stubborn keeps you alive on days like this." Daniel understood. He recognized that kind of stubbornness, the kind that came from losing something you weren't ready to let go of. Emily shifted, gripping the pew again. "I used to walk into this sanctuary every Sunday," she muttered. "Haven't done it since—" Her voice faded, unfinished. Lily whispered to Daniel, "She's brave." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, she really is." And as he watched Emily tremble, fight, breathe, and refuse to sit, he realized the church wasn't just full of faith tonight. It was full of secrets, pain, and people trying quietly to rebuild themselves. Daniel set the food bag on a side table near the kitchen door, but his attention kept drifting back to the pews where Emily clung to the wooden bench. Her therapist crouched near her knee, checking alignment, murmuring encouragement. Every movement she made looked like a negotiation between willpower and pain. Yet nothing in her expression suggested she wanted help from anyone other than the person already guiding her. When the therapist finally nodded for a break, Emily exhaled sharply and lowered herself into a folding chair someone had placed nearby. Sweat beaded along her temples, and her breathing came in shallow bursts. Still, she didn't reach for the wheelchair. She stared at the floor as though refusing to acknowledge the machine she depended on. Trying to be polite, Daniel approached with a slight nod. "You need water? I can grab some." Emily's eyes snapped up, sharp and cool. "I can get it myself," she said, reaching for a nearby bottle with exaggerated independence. Her hand shook slightly, but she didn't let the bottle drop. Daniel raised his palms good-naturedly. Didn't mean anything by it, just offering. "That's the thing," she said softly, unscrewing the cap. "Everyone always is." He didn't know how to respond, so he stayed quiet, letting her have the space she was clearly defending. Lily tugged Daniel's sleeve. "Daddy, does she hurt a lot?" she whispered, staring openly with childlike honesty. Emily's gaze softened at Lily's voice. "Sometimes," Emily answered, surprising both of them. She looked at Lily more gently than she looked at anyone else. "But I'm trying to get stronger." "Why don't you use your chair?" Lily asked, head tilting. "It looks safer." Daniel shot her a subtle warning look, but Emily didn't seem offended. If anything, she almost smiled. Small, strained, but real. "Because I used to walk everywhere," Emily said. "I used to run. And sometimes I want to feel even a little of what that was like."
Lily nodded with solemn understanding only children possess. "I try things even when they're hard too. I'm learning to tie my shoes." A tiny laugh escaped Emily, so quick Daniel almost missed it. "That sounds hard," she said. "It is," Lily replied proudly. Father Mitchell approached, clapping a gentle hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Emily was a violinist before her accident," he explained quietly. "Traveled, performed, taught music. She's working her way back to a life that feels like hers." Emily looked up with a flash of vulnerability. "Working my way back somewhere," she corrected, "not sure where yet." Daniel nodded, something inside him recognizing the tone. "Yeah," he said softly, "I get that." The therapist returned, signaling it was time to start again. Emily nodded once, pushed herself upright with visible effort, and gripped the pew. Daniel watched as her legs trembled beneath her, not with fear, but with defiance. The kind of defiance he knew well. When Emily lifted her chin and steadied herself, Daniel realized something quietly powerful. She didn't refuse help because she was proud. She refused help because she was trying to believe she still belonged in her own life.
The following weeks slipped into a quiet rhythm. Every Sunday evening, Daniel brought leftover food from the diner. Every Sunday evening, the same dim lamp glowed inside St. Andrew's. And every Sunday evening, Emily pushed herself through the same grueling routine of standing, balancing, and fighting muscles that no longer obeyed her without negotiation. Daniel never meant to become part of the pattern, yet somehow he did. He carried chairs, helped Father Mitchell straighten hymn books, checked that the kitchen shelves were stocked, and always he found himself watching Emily's progress out of the corner of his eye. Not out of pity, but out of a growing respect for the way she confronted pain as if it were a rival she refused to let win. Emily, for her part, remained cautious around him. She kept their exchanges brief, her tone clipped, her body angled away as though closeness was something dangerous. Still, small cracks began to show. One night, when the therapist celebrated her holding a standing balance 2 seconds longer than last week, she allowed herself a breathless smile. Daniel caught the moment and offered a quiet, "Nice work." This time, she didn't deflect. She simply nodded once, eyes dropping to the floor. As trust inched forward, so did conversation. Daniel learned she had played violin since she was 4, that she had performed in small ensembles, then larger ones, that music wasn't just her career, it was the place she felt most like herself. Now, the violin case sat untouched in her apartment, a silent reminder of a life she wasn't sure she could reclaim. Emily, hesitatingly, learned pieces of Daniel's life too. He worked long hours, mornings at a mechanic shop, nights at the diner, because being a single parent left little room for rest. Lily adored butterflies, pretended the moon followed their car, and insisted on wearing mismatched socks because it makes school less boring. One evening, as Daniel stacked hymnals near the front pews, Emily joined him, walking 5 shaky steps with the support of the pews. "You always volunteer here?" she asked, breath unsteady. "Helps keep me grounded," Daniel replied. "Helps Lily feel normal. Last 2 years haven't been easy." Emily studied him, grip tightening on the pew. "What happened?" Daniel exhaled slowly. "My wife. There was a car accident 2 years ago. She didn't make it." Something in Emily's posture changed, subtle but unmistakable. Her fingers stilled, her breath caught. Her gaze dropped to the wooden floorboards as if she were suddenly very far from the present moment. "Where?" she asked quietly. "Highway 17, he said, "near exit 12. Emily closed her eyes. A faint tremor crossed her face, the kind born not from physical pain but memory. She murmured something under her breath, too soft for Daniel to catch. Later, as Daniel and Lily left the church, Emily lingered behind. Alone, she unlocked her phone with trembling hands. A news clipping filled the screen, a headline she had read 100 times but had never escaped. Her heart thudded painfully as she traced the date and location with her thumb. Highway 17, exit 12. The same night. The same crash. And for the first time, she realized the truth was no longer distant.
It was standing right in front of her.
A sharp winter wind swept through the church parking lot the following Sunday, rattling the bare branches of the maple trees. Daniel carried a box of canned goods in one arm while holding Lily's small hand with the other. He felt calmer tonight, lighter somehow, though he couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the small routine of the church visits. Maybe it was watching someone else fight their way back to life when his own felt stuck between past and present. Inside, Emily was already at work. She stood near the side aisle, gripping the edge of a pew with both hands as her therapist measured the distance between her feet. Her shoulders were tight, her breaths short and uneven. She was pushing herself harder than usual, and even from across the sanctuary, Daniel could sense something unsettled beneath her concentration. When she finally lowered herself into the folding chair for a break, Daniel approached with caution. "Rough night?" he asked quietly. Emily didn't answer right away. Her jaw clenched as she reached for her water bottle. "I just needed to get through the standing exercise," she said, voice thin. "Didn't want to think too hard." "Think about what?" That question hung in the air like incense smoke. Emily's eyes flicked toward Lily, skipping near the front pew, humming to herself as she arranged her colorful hair clips. Something tightened across Emily's features, something Daniel couldn't name. "Can we talk outside?" she asked suddenly. The shift in her voice made Daniel's stomach knot, but he nodded. He told Lily to stay inside with Father Mitchell, then followed Emily into the cold evening air. She rolled her chair slowly toward the small garden on the side of the church, where a stone bench sat beneath a flickering lamp. The moment felt strangely heavy, as though the night itself knew something was about to break. Emily stopped near the bench and placed her hands in her lap, fingers twisting anxiously. For several seconds she said nothing. Then, in a trembling whisper, she began. "I wasn't always like this," she said. "The accident, it didn't just take my legs. It took everything I built my life around. My music, my career, my independence. And I thought the worst part was the physical loss." Daniel listened quietly, expecting the familiar arc: trauma, recovery, determination. But Emily's voice wavered in a way that warned him her story held sharper edges. "I was in a rideshare that night," she said. "The driver was running late. I told him I needed to get to the theater faster. I urged him to take the highway instead of the side roads. It was raining. He sped up anyway. And then," her voice broke. She swallowed hard, eyes filling. "We collided with another car, a small sedan." Daniel's heart dropped. His breaths turned shallow. Emily wiped a trembling hand across her face. "Your wife was in that car, Daniel." The world seemed to tilt. The cold air bit deeper, sharper. Silence roared between them. "I've lived with that night every single day," Emily whispered. "And when you said the location, the date, I knew. I knew I couldn't hide from it anymore." Daniel stared at her, at the woman who had been rebuilding her life in front of him, while the ground beneath his own seemed to crumble. The truth wasn't distant. It wasn't buried. It was sitting in a wheelchair beneath a church lamp, asking for breath she couldn't catch. And the weight of that truth left him stunned, speechless, and raw with a pain he wasn't prepared to face. Daniel didn't remember walking back into the sanctuary. He didn't remember telling Father Mitchell they had to leave early. He didn't even remember buckling Lily into her booster seat. All he remembered was the cold shock spreading through his body like ice water, numbing everything except the pounding in his chest. On the drive home, the wipers beat a steady rhythm across the windshield, but his mind was stuck replaying Emily's words. "Your wife was in that car." The phrase lodged itself in his chest, sharp enough to pierce every breath. Back home, Lily changed into pajamas and curled on the couch with her stuffed rabbit, unaware of the storm rolling behind her father's eyes. Daniel wandered the small kitchen aimlessly, opening cabinets, closing them again, searching for something solid to anchor himself to. For 2 years, he'd built his life around a simple truth. The accident was tragic, unavoidable. The weather was terrible. The driver lost control. He'd accepted it because he needed to, because it made surviving possible. Now that truth carried a face, a name, a voice, and a wheelchair. He sank into a chair and pressed his hands against his face. Anger flared, hot, breath-stealing anger that made his pulse throb. Emily had lived. His wife had not. Emily was standing again, even if only for seconds. His wife never would. The unfairness of it all hit him with brutal force. "Daddy?" Daniel looked up. Lily stood in the doorway, holding her rabbit by the ear. Her eyes searched his face with unsettling accuracy, the way children who've lost too much learn to read adults quickly. "You look sad," she whispered. Daniel forced his voice steady. "Just tired, sweetheart." Lily walked closer, placing the rabbit gently in his lap. "When you're sad, you need to hug Mr. Cotton," she said. "That's what Mommy used to say." Daniel's throat tightened. He lifted Lily onto his lap, hugging her close, breathing in the familiar scent of apples and shampoo. After a long moment, she pulled back and looked at him seriously. "Why didn't we stay at church?" "It was a long night," Daniel said. "Is Miss Emily okay?" Daniel stiffened. "Why do you ask?" "Because she looked sad when you left," Lily said simply. "Her eyes looked like yours did after Mommy went to heaven." He couldn't speak. Lily continued, her voice soft and almost too wise. "If someone is hurt inside, shouldn't someone be kind to them, like you're kind to me?" Daniel closed his eyes. Her innocent logic struck deeper than any sermon could. She didn't know the truth about the accident, but she understood something else, something purer, simpler. Kindness had saved him more than once. From Father Mitchell, from neighbors, even from strangers. And now there was a woman rebuilding herself inch by painful inch, haunted by guilt she couldn't escape. Daniel opened his eyes slowly. He wasn't ready to face Emily. Not yet. His hurt was still raw and bleeding, but he also knew he couldn't disappear. Not if he wanted to be the father Lily believed he was. Not if he wanted healing instead of bitterness. Not if he wanted to live instead of freeze inside the past. For 3 days, Daniel avoided St. Andrews. He told himself he was busy. He told himself he needed time. But the truth sat heavy in his chest, impossible to shake. Every night after Lily fell asleep, he found himself staring at the cracked photograph on his nightstand. His wife, her smile bright enough to warm an entire room, her hand resting gently on Lily's toddler-sized shoulder. He remembered the hospital's fluorescent lights, the chaplain's voice, the numbness that spread through him when the doctor said the word fatal. He remembered the funeral, the pitying glances, the endless casserole dishes, and the crushing silence that followed. He had survived all of that by believing there was no one to blame. Until now. Each time he closed his eyes, he heard Emily's voice tremble under the church lamp. "I urged the driver to go faster. I told him to take the highway. I've lived with that night every single day." The anger still lived inside him, but it wasn't clean. It twisted with other things: confusion, sorrow, pity, disbelief. On the 4th night, Daniel drove to the cemetery. Snow dusted the headstones like powdered sugar, soft and glittering. He stood before his wife's grave, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. "I'm angry," he admitted aloud, breath clouding in the cold air. "I'm angry because you're gone and she's here, because she gets second chances and you don't." The wind moved gently through the bare trees. "But I'm also tired," he continued quietly. "Tired of carrying everything alone. Tired of freezing up every time something hurts. And Lily's watching me. She sees everything I do." He crouched down, brushing snow from the stone. What kind of man am I teaching her to be? The question lingered, heavier than the snow.
When he stood again, something in him had shifted. Not healed, not forgiven, but softened, just enough. He drove straight to the church. His hands trembled on the steering wheel as he parked. The sanctuary lights glowed faintly, meaning the support group was still inside. Daniel took a deep breath, stepped out, and walked toward the familiar stone steps. The wheelchair was there tonight, but this time it wasn't abandoned. Emily sat in it, head bowed, fingers twisting anxiously at the wheels. Her therapist and Father Mitchell stood a few feet away, giving her space. When she looked up and saw him, her face drained of color. She didn't speak, didn't defend herself. She simply braced, as though preparing for a blow. Daniel stopped before her, heart pounding. "I'm not here because I'm over it," he said, voice low but steady. "I'm not here because everything makes sense now." Emily's eyes shone with unshed tears. "Then why are you here?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Because disappearing is easy, but healing, actually healing, is harder. And I don't want my daughter growing up learning how to run from pain." Emily's breath hitched. "I don't forgive you," Daniel said honestly. "Not yet. Maybe not for a long time." She nodded, jaw trembling. "I understand. But," he added, softer now, "I'm here. I'll keep helping, and we'll figure out the rest one step at a time." Emily closed her eyes, shoulders sagging with a mixture of relief and sorrow. And for the first time since that night beneath the church lamp, they both breathed, not in forgiveness, but in fragile, shared humanity. Daniel returned to St. Andrew's the next week with the same box of canned goods, but something inside him felt different, unsteady, cautious, yet strangely clearer. Emily was already inside, sitting in her wheelchair near the aisle as her therapist adjusted a set of weighted straps around her legs. She glanced up when Daniel entered, her expression tight with nerves, as if unsure whether he would speak to her or simply walk past. He didn't know what to say, but he nodded once, a small gesture, barely anything. And yet Emily's shoulders eased, just slightly. Tonight's session was more intense. The therapist explained they were beginning a new stage of her rehab program, longer standing intervals, resistance bands, and electrical stimulation meant to reawaken dormant pathways. He warned it would hurt. Emily only said, "Let's start." She gripped the pew and lifted herself slowly. Her legs trembled almost immediately. A faint hum from the stimulation pads buzzed against the quiet sanctuary. Daniel sat beside Lily a few rows back, watching as pain flashed across Emily's face in sharp, uncontrollable waves. "Shift. Good. Breathe," the therapist coached. Emily's jaw locked. "I am breathing," she snapped, breathless. Minutes crawled by. Sweat darkened the fabric of her hoodie. Her hands shook against the polished wood. Her legs twitched violently from the stimulation, each shock forcing muscles to fire that had been quiet for too long. Then she faltered. Her body sagged, knees buckling. The therapist caught her before she fell, guiding her back into the chair. Emily buried her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook, not from physical exhaustion, but from something heavier. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't keep pretending I deserve any of this progress." Daniel felt the words hit him like a punch. He had said something similar once, months after the funeral, when every room in his home felt like a reminder of loss. Emily's voice cracked. "Every time I try to move forward, I remember what I took from someone else. I remember your wife. I remember that night. And I think, maybe this pain is what I'm supposed to feel." Her therapist stepped back, giving her space. Father Mitchell remained silent too, eyes soft with understanding. Daniel stood before he realized he was moving. He approached slowly, hands balled into fists, not from anger now, but from the weight of everything pressing inside him. "Emily," he said quietly.
She looked up, eyes red, tears streaking down her cheeks. "I don't know what you're supposed to feel," Daniel admitted, "but I know pain doesn't balance anything. It just keeps you stuck." He knelt so they were eye level. "My wife loved people. She lived to help. If she saw you fighting this hard, she'd tell you what I'm trying to understand for myself." Emily swallowed, barely breathing. "What's that?" "That healing isn't a reward," Daniel said softly. "It's a responsibility. If we're still here, we have to try." Emily's shoulders shook again, but this time the tears came quieter, less like breaking, more like releasing. Nearby, Lily reached into her backpack, pulled out a drawing, and taped it gently onto the pew. It showed a stick-figure woman standing, smiling, legs wobbly but upright. "I made it for you," Lily said shyly, "so you don't forget you're getting better." Emily pressed a hand to her mouth, overcome. And in that moment, pain still raw, forgiveness still distant, a shift began. Not in her legs, but in her heart. And in Daniel's too. A thin drizzle clung to the air the following Sunday, soft enough to blur the street, but steady enough to shine the church steps with a wet sheen. Daniel parked at the usual spot beneath the old sycamore tree, expecting another evening of slow progress and hard-earned inches. Lily unbuckled herself and hopped out with her usual energy, clutching a folded piece of paper she'd drawn that afternoon, another picture of Emily standing, this time with brighter colors and steadier lines. But something was different tonight. Immediately different. The wheelchair was outside again, sitting at the foot of the church steps. But this time it wasn't rain-spotted or forgotten. It was dry, clean, intentionally placed, like a symbol rather than a necessity. Daniel's pulse quickened. "Stay close, Lil," he murmured, though he wasn't sure why. Inside, the sanctuary glowed warmer than usual. Soft lights illuminated the center aisle, where Father Mitchell and two members of the rehab group stood silently, creating a gentle path. The space was unusually still, as though the air itself held its breath. Then Daniel saw her. Emily stood at the back of the church, gripping a walker with both hands. She wore a simple navy long-sleeved shirt and loose athletic pants. Her hair, usually tied up in a messy bun, fell softly around her face. Her legs shook beneath her, but she was upright, truly upright, without the wheelchair anywhere near her. Her therapist adjusted one of the foot braces and stepped aside. "When you're ready," he said. Emily's eyes lifted slowly, first to the aisle, then to Daniel. For a split second, fear flickered through her expression, raw, honest, trembling fear. But beneath it, something stronger lived, determination, resolve, a quiet, powerful dare to herself. Daniel stepped forward instinctively, not touching, not hovering, just making himself visible. His presence was steady, grounding, silent encouragement. Lily squeezed his hand tightly, her breath caught in her chest. Emily inhaled shakily, lifted her chin, and took her first step. Her right foot slid forward an inch. Her knee wobbled. She didn't fall. The therapist whispered, "Good. Again." Emily took another step, then another. Each movement was agony written in motion, her shoulders trembling, her jaw clenched, her breath sharp and shallow. But she moved. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, she moved. Halfway down the aisle, she faltered. Her knees buckled, her grip tightened desperately on the walker. A choked, frustrated sound escaped her lips. Daniel stepped forward, heart pounding. "Emily," he said softly, voice steady, "look up." She did. Their eyes met. For a split second, fear flickered through her expression, raw, honest, trembling fear. But beneath it, something stronger lived, determination, resolve, a quiet, powerful dare to herself.
Daniel stepped forward instinctively, not touching, not hovering, just making himself visible. His presence was steady, grounding, silent encouragement. Lily squeezed his hand tightly, her breath caught in her chest. Emily inhaled shakily, lifted her chin, and took her first step. Her right foot slid forward an inch. Her knee wobbled. She didn't fall. The therapist whispered, "Good. Again." Emily took another step, then another. Each movement was agony written in motion, her shoulders trembling, her jaw clenched, her breath sharp and shallow. But she moved. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, she moved. Halfway down the aisle, she faltered. Her knees buckled. Her grip tightened desperately on the walker. A choked, frustrated sound escaped her lips. Daniel stepped forward, heart pounding. "Emily," he said softly, voice steady, "look up." She did. Their eyes met. "You're not alone," he said. "Not anymore." Emily exhaled, a broken, shaky breath that held months of fear and guilt. And with new resolve, she lifted her foot again. Step. Until finally, sweating, crying, trembling, she reached him. Her hands loosened from the walker and hovered uncertainly, as though unsure of what came next. Daniel didn't touch her. He simply opened his hands slightly, offering steadiness if she wanted it. Emily swayed. Then she leaned forward, not collapsing, not falling, just resting her forehead gently against his shoulder as her tears soaked through his shirt. "I'm standing," she whispered. "Daniel, I'm really standing." Daniel swallowed the ache rising in his throat. "Yeah," he murmured, "you are, and I'm proud of you." Her breath hitched, one final trembling exhale of triumph and grief. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a miracle. It was something quieter, and maybe stronger. A step toward a future neither of them thought they deserved.
In the weeks that followed, life at St. Andrew's felt different. Not louder or busier, but steadier, as though the air carried a new rhythm. Emily's breakthrough that night became a quiet turning point for everyone who witnessed it. Not a celebration, not a miracle, just a truth. She could move forward, inch by inch, without collapsing into the past. Daniel found himself noticing small things he hadn't before. The way Emily adjusted her braces on her own now, jaw set with determination. The way she stretched her fingers nervously before standing, as if warming up for a concert she wasn't ready to admit she missed. The way she sometimes searched for him in the crowd before beginning her exercises, not for permission, but for presence. Lily, of course, integrated into Emily's world almost instantly. On Thursday evenings, when Daniel brought her along to drop food at the church pantry, Lily would wander toward the wooden piano tucked against the sanctuary wall. Emily would roll beside her, unlocking the cover gently, and guide Lily's small hands over the keys. "Press here," Emily would say, demonstrating a simple scale with her left hand. "Not too hard, let the sound ring." Lily would giggle each time she hit the wrong note, and Emily would smile, real smiles now, not the careful ones she wore when hiding. Daniel often watched from a distance, leaning on the doorframe, letting the soft notes fill cracks inside him he hadn't realized still existed. There were shared meals, too. Simple dinners in the church kitchen after sessions, pasta, casseroles, reheated leftovers. Lily chattered endlessly, and Emily listened with a gentleness that made Daniel's chest ache with something complicated and tender. And on Sundays, they began sitting on the same pew. At first, Daniel sat at the aisle, Lily in the middle, Emily on the far end, with her wheelchair parked neatly beside the bench. But over time, the distance shortened. One Sunday, Emily chose the bench instead of the chair altogether, bracing herself with determination as she sat carefully beside Lily. "You okay?" Daniel whispered. She nodded. "I want to try. Feels good to sit like everybody else for a change." Lily leaned against her without hesitation. "You're like my Miss Emily now," she declared proudly.
Emily blinked rapidly, touched in a way she tried and failed to hide. "I guess I am." They stayed like that through the entire service. Daniel noticed how Emily's hands relaxed as she listened to the choir, how her face softened at Lily's off-key humming, how she no longer flinched at every movement, no longer held herself as if waiting to be judged. Afterward, when Daniel offered to walk her to the car, she shook her head. "I can walk to the exit tonight," she said. "Just help me balance." He held out his arm, and she rested a hand lightly on his forearm, not leaning, not collapsing, but steadying herself with trust. They moved together down the aisle, at a slow, careful pace. Lily skipped ahead, humming the scale Emily had taught her. And as they reached the wooden doors, Daniel realized something quiet but profound. This wasn't forgiveness. This wasn't romance. This wasn't the end of grief. It was something gentler, a new kind of family forming one Sunday at a time. It was early March when Daniel stopped in the middle of folding laundry and realized he hadn't visited his wife's grave with anyone except Lily, not once, not with family, not with friends, not even with Father Mitchell. He had always kept that space private, sacred, untouched, sealed off like a room packed with memories he didn't dare disturb. But Emily had become woven into their life now, not replacing anything, not filling a void, but existing beside the hurt in a way that felt strangely natural. She didn't try to erase the past or pretend things were fixed. She simply showed up, quietly, consistently, like someone learning how to breathe again without apology. So one evening, after Lily begged for just 10 more minutes of piano lessons at church, Daniel approached Emily while she adjusted her braces. His voice came out softer than intended. "Can you come somewhere with us tomorrow?" Emily blinked. "Somewhere?" Daniel nodded. His throat tightened, but he forced the words out. "To see her, my wife." Emily froze, completely. The color drained from her cheeks, and her fingers stilled over the strap she had been fastening. "Daniel, are you sure?" "No," he said honestly, "but I think it's time." Emily lowered her gaze. "If you change your mind, I won't." The next afternoon, the three of them drove to the small cemetery behind the oak-lined park where Daniel used to bring Lily as a toddler. Spring was barely beginning. Patches of snow clung stubbornly to the ground, melting into soft earth. Emily sat quietly in the back seat, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Lily hummed to herself, unaware of the emotional weight her father carried. When they reached the grave, Daniel lifted Lily out of the car while Emily remained momentarily still, staring at the headstone from a distance. Her voice struggled when she finally spoke. "I don't know what I'm supposed to say." "You don't have to say anything," Daniel replied. "Just come." He extended his hand, not forcing, just offering. Emily inhaled shakily and placed her hand in his. Together, they moved to the grave. At the foot of the stone, Daniel knelt with Lily, brushing away damp leaves. Emily sat in her chair a few feet back, trembling. After a long silence, she whispered, "Can you help me stand, just for a moment?" Daniel looked at her, surprised, but nodded. He positioned himself beside her, braced her left arm, and gently lifted. Her legs shook violently, and for a moment she wavered, but she stayed upright. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I am so sorry," she whispered to the headstone, voice cracking. "I think about you every day. I think about what happened. I wish I could go back. I wish I could change everything." Daniel felt tears burn behind his eyes, but didn't interrupt, didn't comfort, didn't correct. He let her speak, because the truth deserved space, because grief deserved witnesses. When Emily's knees buckled, he guided her gently back into the wheelchair. She sobbed quietly, hands shaking uncontrollably. Lily stepped forward with her small bunch of daisies and placed them gently at the base of the headstone. "Mommy likes flowers," she whispered. "Miss Emily likes flowers too." Daniel swallowed hard, overwhelmed by the fragile beauty of it all, the past and present standing side by side without collapsing. Emily wiped her face with trembling fingers. "Thank you for letting me come." Daniel nodded. Healing isn't about forgetting, he said quietly. It's about letting the past stand beside the present without tearing you apart. Emily blinked at him, eyes soft, filled with something tender and impossibly human. And for the first time since the accident, neither of them felt alone with their grief.
Spring arrived slowly that year, as if unsure whether the world was ready for warmth again. But one bright Sunday in late April, the sunlight finally settled with confidence across the town, warming rooftops, melting the last stubborn patches of snow, and filtering through the stained glass windows of St. Andrew's in soft, honey-colored beams. Daniel parked beneath the familiar sycamore tree and glanced at the back seat. Lily was asleep, cheek pressed against her stuffed rabbit, breathing softly. In the trunk sat Emily's wheelchair, folded neatly beside the donation boxes. He expected to pull it out, as always. It had become a quiet part of their routine, the same way Sundays had become a gentle anchor in their lives. But when he walked around to open the trunk, Emily touched his arm. "Leave it," she said. Daniel turned. "Emily?" She shook her head once, eyes steady. Not reckless, not stubborn, just sure. "If I need it, I'll ask. But today, I want to walk in." Daniel hesitated. For months, they'd learned to measure progress in inches, not strides. Every step had been a battle. Every moment upright had been a victory measured in pain. But today, something in her posture was different, firmer, grounded, hopeful in a way that didn't erase the past, but honored how far she'd come. "Okay," he said softly, "we'll go slow." "I know," she replied with a small smile. "You always make sure we do." They woke Lily gently, and the three of them made their way toward the church. Emily held on to Daniel's arm, not for dependence, but for balance. Her gait was uneven, but determined. Her knees wobbled on the slight incline, but she steadied herself with slow breaths. As they reached the steps, Father Mitchell, standing near the doorway, blinked in surprise. Emily lifted her chin and offered him a calm, confident nod. "I'll take the rail," she said. With her right hand gripping the iron railing and her left resting lightly on Daniel's forearm, she pulled herself up one step, then another, then another. Each rise was a test, each shift of weight a tremor of effort. But she climbed, one measured inch at a time. When she reached the top step, the sunlight caught her face, and Daniel saw the moment her disbelief turned into pride. Inside the sanctuary, the air was filled with the early chords of the choir warming up. People turned to watch as Emily walked down the aisle, her steps shaky but hers, completely hers. Lily tugged on Emily's sleeve. "You did it," she whispered reverently. Emily knelt slowly, awkward, careful, almost losing balance once, but she knelt until she was eye level with the little girl. "We did it," she said softly. They sat together in the same pew as always, Daniel at the aisle, Lily in the middle, Emily on the end. But today felt different. Today felt earned. Midway through the service, as the choir sang a hymn about mercy and new beginnings, Emily reached for Daniel's hand under the bench. He hesitated only a second before entwining his fingers with hers. Her palm was warm, steady, alive. Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time in 2 years, he didn't feel the weight of the world pulling him back into the past. He felt something else, something lighter, something possible. When he opened his eyes again, he caught sight of the folded wheelchair through the open doorway, sunlight glinting off the metal frame. It wasn't a symbol of limitation anymore. It was proof of how far she'd come, how far they'd all come. Lily leaned against them both, humming softly. Emily exhaled, shoulders relaxing. Daniel let the warmth of the moment settle into him like a long overdue peace. This wasn't a replacement for what was lost. It wasn't erasure. It wasn't perfect. It was healing, shared, slow, imperfect, beautiful healing. And for the first time since the accident, Daniel realized, they weren't rebuilding alone. They were rebuilding together.